Next up in the 2024 Heat Check Scouting Report series is Colorado's Cody Williams, a lengthy do-it-all forward who went one and done for the Buffs and is the brother of OKC Thunder star Jalen Williams. Williams has long been a polarizing prospect within his class, but ballooned late to jump to number 5 per RSCI. He's a wing hybrid that stands at a really lean 6'8" with a reported but unconfirmed 7-foot wingspan. He saw a few different injuries in his season with Colorado, first injuring his wrist before getting elbowed in the face at a practice, and finally suffering an ankle injury. Despite that, he played in 24 games, averaging 11.9 points, 3 rebounds, and 1.6 assists while shooting 55% overall, 42% from beyond the arc, and 71% from the line. Here's how Heat Check works. I'm going to identify one draft prospect and grade them on what I believe to be the most generally important skills and aspects of their game: athleticism, scoring, defense, passing and playmaking, and overall feel for the game. After those 5, I'll grade one additional skill relative to that prospect that I think is going to have the biggest effect on their stock. That will be deemed the swing skill. Each skill will be graded on the Heat Check chart with ranges from freezing all the way to scorching. When that's all said and done, I'll divvy out one final overall score. Starting with Cody Williams' athleticism, I've given him a warm grade, but that undersells his physical tools just a tad. Despite being around 200 pounds, likely just shy of that mark, Williams is every single bit of 6'8", if not taller, and has an obviously plus wingspan. His pure athleticism, I would say, is fairly mild, but it is made better by the aforementioned length and pretty good fluidity. He's not exceptionally explosive, he doesn't have teleportation level bounce or rocket acceleration, but he does have that glide effect that makes finishers so dangerous, especially coupled with his length. Williams is pretty coordinated in his movement, although there's times it still seems like he's figuring things out on that front. That's likely just him growing into his frame. Regardless, he won't stick out like a sore thumb athletically in the NBA. I've gone with warm for Cody Williams' scoring. Despite some hyper efficiency for a freshman, I think there's a few areas I'd really need to see comfortable improvement in before I grade higher. But the good news on that front is that Williams should have a pretty easy pathway towards that. Starting with the simple stuff, Williams averaged just shy of 12 points on 55% shooting overall, hitting on 42% of his three-pointers and converting 70% of his free throws. All pretty good numbers for a 19-year-old on an up-and-down Colorado team. Williams primarily got his at the college level by finding various ways to the rim, more often than not off-ball, and using his elite length and touch to finish there. Nearly 60% of his field goal points were scored at the rim, and he got there in a variety of ways. 81 points in transition, 41 as the pick and roll handler, and 31 points cutting. He ranked excellent per synergy in all but pick and roll, where he graded average. The rest of Williams' points were nabbed cashing in on open jumpers or drawing contact. There's a lot to dive into regarding Williams' shooting, and I'm going with something else for his swing skill, so I'll dive into it here. The 3-point numbers at this point are just a little bit misleading. The 42% does stand out, but it was on just 41 total attempts. Just not really a big enough number to concretely say he's a good shooter, especially given the difficulty and variance of the shots he took, which weren't great. I will say though, there is room for optimism here. You don't accidentally shoot 40% from 3 for 20 plus games, and coupling that with what I believe to be good form and generally good decision making, I like his chances to be passable early in the NBA and evolve into even more. So while it might be too early to say he's an elite shooter, I don't think it's too early to say he's a very capable one right now. So where does this amalgamation of skills leave us? The good news is that Williams is more than capable of an off-ball role, which will be really important for his early NBA career and potentially even further. Even if he's just able to play finish, hit spot-up jumpers, and attack breakdowns forever, that'd be just fine. We'll touch on some of the more limiting stuff later in the video, but for the purposes of the scoring section as a whole, I'm comfortable saying Williams is elite in a few areas, steady in a few more, and has improvable pathways in others. Defensively, I think Cody's well ahead of the curve. I've given him a hot grade and really consider projecting him to be a scorching defender long-term in the NBA. For all the places Williams' length stands out on the offensive end, that applies even more so defensively. The baseline stats, 0.7 blocks and 0.6 steals per game, don't really paint the full picture in how overwhelming Williams can be. For the most part, the fluidity and coordination hold up, letting him slide his feet, hound at the point of attack, and just be a general nuisance off ball. For his size and archetype, he is exceptionally good at navigating screens. He doesn't have the best hands, some of the reason for his lack of stocks, but he seems to have a really fundamental understanding of defense. He is surprisingly good in recovery when the things like technique and footwork aren't impeccable. Williams is going to be at his best mirroring wings and small forwards, but there's certainly some wiggle room in letting him take both bigger and smaller assignments. There's a few defensive pitfalls, of course: attentiveness, pretty typical stuff for a freshman, as well as strength, which a lot of thinly framed players struggle with. The latter more limits him positionally. Guarding really physical fours might present some issues, but prospects always put on weight and add strength. I'd expect Williams to be no different. He's a good defensive prospect now who projects to get even better in the future. For Cody Williams' passing and playmaking, I've gone with the warm grade. That's likely pretty unpopular compared to the consensus, which seems to be really high on Williams' passing. And I get it, in 24 games, Williams averaged 1.6 assists for a 38-48 assist-to-turnover ratio. Not a massive deal considering the turnovers mainly emanated from the handle. There's times where Williams' passing definitely pops. There is some face-up stuff that a lot of players his size simply cannot do. Some of the high-level pick-and-roll plays jump out. And for the most part, I think his decision-making holds up in this area, which is big for his general team fit and potentially connective style. There's a decent amount of the simple carelessness, but not anything that I really dock him for, just freshman stuff. My primary qualm lies in the consistency. To this point, there's just not enough steadiness on tape in this area to suggest that it will seamlessly carry over. And I worry some about his ability to access all parts of the court with ease, something I'll touch on in a little bit, and it kind of limits him in this area. Overall, I think Williams is a fine passer. I think there's a great chance he ends up well into the net positive here in his NBA career. For Cody Williams' unquantifiable feel for the game, I've gone with a hot grade. I've already alluded to it several times in the video, but I think Cody's a high feel player and one that uses it to succeed too. Be it his impeccable touch around the rim, sense of how to best attack defense, above average passing game, or any myriad of defensive skills, I think Williams has an uncommon approach to the game, especially for his size. I think there's times where his athleticism or coordination can't fully execute on what his IQ allows, which is just fine for a 19-year-old. That's a good spot to be in. You'll always take feel and basketball IQ over raw tools, and luckily Williams has both. For Cody's swing skill, I've gone with creation/handling. With the lengthy 6'8 frame, good feel, some touch scoring the ball, the biggest ceiling raiser is going to be his ability to create shots and/or space on offense, and unfortunately this is the area that I think hinders him the most. We'll start with the handle and kind of parlay that into the overall creation ability. It's not great, he can be pretty loose with the ball, he doesn't have an array of dribble moves, and is generally pretty limited to straight line drives and using his decel to really gain an advantage. When you mix that with the fact that his athleticism just doesn't allow for speedy bursts or acceleration, it can kind of lead to him not being able to turn the corner and reverting to that push off pretty often. There's also little evidence so far that he can really connect the dribbling and the jump shooting, making just 5 of his 16 dribble jumper attempts with Colorado. The good news is that Williams still managed to be efficient everywhere despite this. He doesn't struggle much with simple dribble drives, he's great in the open floor with really long strides. He's already learned to succeed in the lesser role, and we've seen people improve in this area to blossom into a star before. If you're seeing people mock Cody as high as 3, 4, 5, they're likely banking on this particular skill really coming around. The grade. I've given Cody Williams a grade of 7.7, which should comfortably land him within my top 10 to 14 prospects, depending on how a few more grades shake out. I think Williams is far from a finished product, but I already like a ton of the things he brings to the table as a lengthy forward. Teams can never have too much versatile defense, strong finishing, and connectivity. I do personally think the handle is pretty limiting, but as I've often said, creation can be really overrated, especially in a class that projects to ship a lot of really talented contributors to the league, albeit not in star-studded roles. If Williams can fill out, improve on a few things, and refine the things he's already good at, I think there's a chance we're looking at a two-way wing that can really help a team win ball games down the line. That's it for this one. Let me know what you think of Cody Williams, what you grade him, where you draft him, drop who you want to see in the next heat check. We'll see you later.